Ages. Here's a little more about this week's topic. The Middle Ages occurred around 500 to 1500. The late Middle Ages consisted of the emerging city-states of England, France, Spain, and Russia. Throughout all of the different city-states, there were different rulers, different conflicts, and different beliefs. Each of the city-states united as a nation and worked together to be successful in their economy, education, and government. The Crusades, 100 Years' War, invasions, and Black Plague all had negative effects on the city-states. However, in the end of this medieval period, the works of past scholars from Western Europe were preserved, allowing the knowledge of philosophy, medicine, and science to be passed down in later times and also used today.
The first question is, who were Ferdinand and Isabella and why were they important?
According to my calculations, they were the king and queen of Spain. They unified Spain and expelled the Jews and Moors.
The marriage of Isabella and Ferdinand in 1469 unified two separate kingdoms of Spain. During the reign of Ferdinand and Isabella, Inquisition courts were set up to get rid of the people who practiced any other religion besides Roman Catholicism. The practice of a different religion was called heretics. If you were suspected of heresy, you were questioned and possibly tortured and killed.
Second question, who was Charles V and why was he important?
Well, he was the king of Spain and expanded the Spanish Empire into the Western Hemisphere.
Who was Joan of Arc and why was she important? The answer is she was a peasant girl from France who was a unifying force and led important victories during the 100 Years' War.
Heavenly voices spoke to Joan of Arc, telling her to rescue France from English conquerors by forcing the English out of France and giving the French crown to the true king, the son of Charles V.
On May 7, 1429, Joan of Arc was in charge of leading the French army into battle against the English fort, blocking the roads to Orleans. She was successful.
Who led the Norman conquest and united most of England?
William the Conqueror.
Five key events of the Crusades were what? The answer is, number 1, Pope Urban's speech. Number 2, the capture of Jerusalem. Number 3, founding of Crusader states. Number 4, loss of Jerusalem to Saladin. And number 5, the sack of Constantinople by Western Crusaders.
And now onto our speed round. First question, what were formed by European monarchies as a consolidated power?
Nation states.
Question number 2, English common law had its beginnings during the reign of
King Henry II.
What lawmaking body in England had its beginnings during this time?
Common law.
What conflict with France united England as a nation?
100 Years' War.
What were the 5 major effects of the Crusades? Number 1, weaken the Pope and nobles. Number 2, strengthen monarchs. Number 3, stimulated trade throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East. Number 4, left a legacy of bitterness among Christian, Jews, and Muslims. And number 5, weakened the Byzantine Empire. More about the Crusades.
People joined the Crusades for 3 different reasons.
Economic motivation,
Political motivation,
and religious motivation.
Economic motivation. If they were successful, they would be rewarded with gold, silver, and lots of riches.
Political motivation. If they were successful, they would be rewarded political power, such as leader, chief, or director.
Religious motivation. If they were successful, they would be rewarded with pleasing God and going to heaven.
What group invaded and conquered the Byzantine Empire?
The Ottoman Turks in 1453.
How did church scholars interpret and value ancient learnings?
They interpreted Greek and Arabic works into Latin.
Education was largely confined to what group during the Middle Ages? Therefore, they were largely responsible for preserving what?
Church scholars preserved Greek and Arabic works.
Church scholars were some of the few people who were literate. They worked in monasteries and laid the foundations for the rise of universities in Europe by making new knowledge in philosophy, medicine, and science. What was the impact of the Black Death on economic or social institutions? Number 1, decline in population. Number 2, scarcity of labor. Number 3, towns freed from feudal obligations. Number 4, decline of church influence. And number 5, disruption of trade. More information on the Black Plague. The population of Europe went from 450 million to 350 to 375 million.
Trade declined and prices rose. Many workers were hard to find because the plague killed them all off.
The church lost significant power because people blamed the church for not curing the plague.
Feudalism crumbled because all the serfs died and land went unused. People viewed life in two different ways after experiencing the Black Plague. Some were negative, while others thought positively.
King John limited his power and the power of future kings when he signed what and when?
The Magna Carta on June 15, 1215. More information on the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta, also known as the Great Charter, applied to every citizen. It included rights such as no taxation without representation, a jury trial, and the protection of law. These are now used as the basic legal rights in England and the United States of America.
Who was Hugh Capet and why was he important?
He was the King of France and the founder of the Capetian dynasty.
Hugh Capet established the throne in Paris, France, and expanded his dynasty control over most of France.
What were the Crusades and why were they carried out?
It was a holy war to gain control of the Holy Land.
What were the 3 economic effects of the Crusades? The answers were, number 1, weaken the Pope and nobles, strengthen the monarch. Number 2, stimulated trade throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East. And 3, weaken the Byzantine Empire and feudal nobility. More about the Crusades. The Crusades began when Pope Urban II called for a holy war. The goal of the Crusades was to recover Jerusalem and the Holy Land from the Muslim Turks. There were 4 Crusades, however, the First Crusade was the only successful one.
Who were the Mongols and where did they extend their empire?
They were nomadic people from the steppe and extended their empire from China to Poland.
Mongol armies invaded Russia, China, and Muslim states in Southwest Asia, destroying cities and countrysides. This was the start of their empire. Ivan the Great threw off the rule of the Mongols, centralized power in Moscow, and expanded the Russian nation.
What decimated the population of much of Asia and then Europe during the 14th century?
The Black Plague. The Black Plague.
What were the Crusades? Welcome to Are You Smart?
Go, start the lights. I'm not the host.
Why are you? Stop! Why don't I get to PM you?
I use
Step.
Oh my.
Did I